Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs IndyCar. I'm your host, Thiemo Daily. No Nate for this episode because this time out I'm talking everything IndyCar with Sky Sports IndyCar commentator Tom Gaymor. We caught up recently to chat about his own racing career, how he transitioned into commentary, what it's like to commentate on the Indy 500, his thoughts on the season so far, and much more. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi Tom, thank you very much for being here today. First of all, how are you?
I'm very well. I can't complain, although I think I'm going to be slightly sleep deprived after this weekend. I mean, obviously, the IndyCar race being under lights in St. Louis means a very late night or an early morning, whichever way you look at it for me on Sunday night, Monday morning.
Yeah, it's kind of whichever one is the least worst for you when you view it through that lens. You want to have a step where you just claim that you're getting up early for it, but we don't do that for every racing series. I think it shows the love we've got for IndyCar, doesn't it?
Yeah, and to be honest, actually, I'm better at staying up. I was just having this conversation. I'm better at staying up late than I am getting up early. So, I'll do events from all over the world. And actually, the Suzuka 8 hour, for example, your call time's 1:30 and then you're all the way through. So I prefer staying up than I do getting up early. But, it's a good problem to have because,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I've not really got a proper job. I'm getting up as all the fans do, and I'm getting paid to do it. And so I'm incredibly fortunate, very lucky.
Yeah, and I think definitely the geography of it does pose some fun challenges. I know that Australia for the last couple of years for Formula One, especially for the feeder series as I do, then it's quite an interesting thing of strategic napping. I think is the best way to do it. I tried staying up, I tried getting up early. Neither of them particularly worked. So it's nap while you can and just hope that that works.
And then if you're doing a whole weekend, you're sort of 3, 4 nights into it.
Oh yeah.
I'm quite lucky because it's only one night. I'm not doing the Saturday night. So yeah.
We're already getting sidetracked there, but what I'd like to know is the first question I ask everyone is what first got you interested in motorsport?
Yeah, it's a good question. I grew up around rugby and cricket, so my granddad was the honorary RFU doctor. So he was the doctor at Twickenham, where I'm born and bred, just down the road. So grew up around England rugby. Used to ball boy at Twickenham as a young kid. My stepdad played cricket for Surrey as well. So it was rugby or cricket from a very young age, and we didn't have any any real insight or introduction to the motorsport world. But I was always super fascinated with watching car racing. And I used to watch on Grandstand, the British touring cars, Formula 3 with the late, great Murray Walker and obviously the Formula 1. And then I was introduced to a wonderful man who's no longer with us called David Price. And that was through my granddad. He was the doctor of the team. And they used to travel around the world and he'd do all their inoculations and various other things. So I'd go down there and see. He was racing in the sort of World Sports Car Championship at the time, Le Mans, and various different things. So I'd go and see the cars there. And they were the McLarens. Do you remember the Harrods McLaren and the West McLaren and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're talking 90s here. And I was just hooked on it from then on in. I mean, I'd always had karting parties, always watched it, but to actually get hands on, get into that environment, and very quickly my school holidays turned to going down there and just spending all the time in the workshop with the mechanics and making really bad cups of tea and generally getting in everyone's way. But I loved it. And
But you
then my
involved.
karting progressed, and I was one of the young karters that came up through Sandown with Andrew Crichton. So you've got Sam Bird, the late Christian Backerud, who raced in GP2, Duncan Tappy, a whole host of different people that came up there. Ollie Milroy, and it was a wicked little kart track inside a horse race venue in Surrey, and we all karted there. And then I was fortunate enough to go to France. My first year in cars was in the what would be now French Formula 4, but Formula Renault over there, Campus, and I lived in Le Mans. and never look back.
I said not a bad way to go about things. You're saying about Murray Walker being the one commentating at the point. I think at that point I was already kind of understanding how this all happened because as soon as you hear him commentate, you kind of don't have a choice after that, really, do you? But for then to it to transpire in the way that it did, kind of, it doesn't surprise me because it seems then, yeah, once you're in, you're in. I always kind of joke it's a little bit like the mafia. You can get in easily enough, but getting out is a lot trickier. Not that anyone really wants to either.
No, it's motorsport is very much for want for a better word, addictive. Like
Mm,
it's just spending time around the sort of the smell, the sound, the excitement, and like-minded people. There's just something very, very special about that. And I've always been a fan and a fan first, but I was very fortunate to compete as well. And I love the competition aspect. I love the dopamine hit and the endorphins of
mm.
competition and those sleepless nights and the nerves and feeling sick and, everything that comes with competition. And to a certain extent, live TV delivers that adrenaline spike as well, because you'll know from what you do or whatever it is, that crescendo into a live event, especially when you're delivering live TV and you hear the countdown in your ear and the adrenaline's pumping, the heart rate's up. It's very, very special. That performer element, I'm really, really lucky to sort of carry across from driving into watching the sport as well.
I think as a fan and maybe the same like you say as a commentator, even when you have a motorsport season, I'm thinking of F1 in 2023 when it wasn't the most exciting time of it, but there was still that inevitable kind of rush you'd get just as the five red lights come on before the start of your go, maybe this time it will be something different. You never know. So you can't truly predict it. And obviously we got that in Singapore that year and we'd have maybe preferred that a few more times, but it's for those occasions where you kind of justify having that feeling and it makes that all worthwhile. You're
That's
saying,
the roller coaster of sport, isn't it? And it doesn't matter if it's Formula One or football. I'm an Arsenal fan. We
hmm,
never win anything. My wife's a Tottenham fan. We're not big football fans, but their first European trophy in 40 years. But the fans turn out every single week thinking it's going to be
hmm.
different.
It's the age-old thing, like the Ferrari fans. It's kind of this year will be the year.
Yeah, this exactly. It's
Um,
this year will be our year, and it's the highs and the lows.
you're saying as well that you got the chance to compete, and I definitely want to talk a bit more about that. But was there ever a possibility? You say you were growing up with rugby and cricket as two main things, and naturally, motorsport is where you go into then. Did you ever have much to do competing wise with rugby or the cricket, or was that just sort of more of an introduction to sport as a whole, and then from there you just deviated?
Yeah, so I went to a school that was very good at sport. The facilities were great and the coaching staff were excellent. And so I did play quite a high standard. We had 8 teams of each sport, in each year. So I did play ones for rugby, but cricket, I was a skillful player when it came to rugby, but I was far too small. Cricket was very much my lane. I love cricket. I still, I want to go for a net now. I was watching Australia, South Africa at Lords this morning. I love cricket. While I certainly love the batting, I'm not sure I like fielding all day, but I loved opening the batting and definitely would have wanted to maybe progress that. I don't know if I'd have been any good, but I did score quite a few hundreds at school and play outside of school. So yeah, I enjoyed that. But it was motorsport that captured my fascination, my dreams, my thoughts, and
Hmm.
that's the beauty of being a fan. It's for you because it's all you can think about. I love now watching cricket because I quite like the naivety of being a fan. I quite like not knowing the story, not knowing the drivers, not knowing why things aren't going well for people and some of the sort of hidden stories that don't necessarily come out. It's a bit like knowing the cheats for a computer game. Whereas when I watch cricket or rugby now, I'm just a fan. I don't know anyone. I don't really, know it inside out. And it's just quite nice
It's
to,
easy to be neutral and just enjoy it from a
yeah, just sit
fan
back and
perspective,
enjoy it.
isn't it?
Whereas
Yeah.
when I watch certain forms of motorsport, I know who's got upgrades. I know who's got a tub that's old or overweight or this or that, or, why things aren't necessarily working out.
And as well, you're saying that you were in quite an interesting group of karters in that period where you were coming up then, but then you got the opportunity to go to France and having to live the tough life of actually getting to live in Le Mans, of all places. How did that opportunity come about, and how did that whole side of things go for you after that?
So there was a scholarship that was available to all of the Super One karters and karters in the country, really. Now, I never competed at a top level when it came to karting because we just didn't have the budget, and I was a late starter. So I was, here doing my four-stroke karting and enjoying traveling around the south of England to Buttmore and Clay Pigeon and various different places like that, doing the Honda Challenge and Formula 6 and blah, blah, blah. But obviously at the time you had Champions of the Future and Super One, which were the two primary two-stroke environments for the top drivers. And there was a competition because Elf sponsored the Super One series for all the karters to come to Silverstone and over a period of 2 days be put through their paces, and then there would be a short list of sort of 8 drivers from the 60, 70 people that attended, and they would pick 2 drivers for a fully funded year in France. And I got through the 2 days at Silverstone. I then was one of the 2 chosen at Le Mans in the shootout test. And the other driver was a guy called Lars Sexton, who was, a big 2-stroker. He had the O plate for the Super One series. And it was nice to be in and around, an individual that I'd sort of looked up to in the karting world, but I sort of had to put that aside because all of a sudden, I was racing against all these people. And then when I came back from France and I was doing Formula Ford, because Formula Ford was where everyone went back in the day. There was no sort of European championships or, Renault hadn't really happened. It was all about British Formula Ford and British Formula 3 in the late 90s, early 2000s. So when I came back, I had Clivio Pizzioni just finished second in the Formula A World Championship to Lewis Hamilton. And then I had Clivio Pizzioni, who'd been world champion in 98 for Tony Kart. So I had these sort of illustrious teammates that I'd got nowhere near in my sort of poodling around Sandown in sort of leafy Surrey. And it was a wild time. And, I won at Pau, put it on pole, won at Pau, 2 seconds at Le Mans. I finished 4th in the championship my first year, and then I came back, finished 2nd in the championship here. Stephen Kane won it. He won the McLaren Autosport Award that year as well. So it didn't go badly.
No, I was going to say because you say you were late started there, and what we were talking about with cricket as well. If you'd stuck with that, you'd wonder if you'd have been good enough to go away in that as well. Does your performance then kind of make you think that does it? I'm trying to think which way to phrase it, but did it reassure you that you were in the right place and you didn't mind not necessarily making it further because it showed that you were capable of doing it still? And you said that you made it to this scholarship there. You get put through your pace at Silverstone. You're maybe not thinking that you're going to get further than that because on some level you have the confidence, but on the other level you're thinking there's all these other people here. It would be kind of insane for me to beat them because I'm a late starter on this side of thing. I'm looking up at these people. Then you make it to the next step. Were you sort of thinking, I'll take the next chance, and we'll just see how far we can push it. But the expectation's not there, or what was your mindset at that point?
I did, I always had that belief. I think whatever you do in life, you need to believe that you can do it. So I always had that sort of naivety to believe it's there. A really good friend of mine is a former double Olympian, or he's a current double Olympian in terms of swam at Sydney and Athens. We went to school together, and whenever I swim with him, I always feel that I can maybe keep up. So you always, and obviously I can't. He's like a fish, and I'm sort of flapping around and hopeless when we swim together. But I always believed I could do it. But deep down, you do have that imposter syndrome where you are looking around and thinking, crikey, I'm around some really, really quick people here. And where do I fit into this? And, got to try and make your own way and not focus on anyone else and focus on yourself. But it definitely impacted my performance and my ability to be the best that I could be in those spaces. I think for the cricket, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I enjoy playing cricket, but I didn't have the burning desire to do what I did on the race circuit on the cricket pitch. I enjoyed it, and if you're going to be brilliant at something, you need to have that sort of 10,000 hour rule, that relentless commitment and drive and passion. And, because anything that you do in life is a rocky road, and it's full of highs and lows, and you need that resilience and that, that sort of ambition to push through. And I certainly had that in abundance when it came to motorsport. And, had I not broken my back, it may have been a bit different. That's the only question mark I have over any of the past is not, whether or not I should have played cricket. Probably wouldn't have broken my back on the cricket pitch, but, what would have happened?
A more interesting trick if you had managed that. I'd have been intrigued as that story, but we'll touch on that in a second, actually. I think sometimes you say about cricket and then motorsport being the one where there was more of a burning desire. Sometimes as well, I've seen and I've had myself where you can enjoy a sport a lot, but as soon as it starts being taken seriously up to a point, or more seriously and more competitive, it takes the fun out of it a bit as well, and you don't enjoy it as much as you did. So maybe was that part of it, do you think, and why you thought, well, even if I have to take motorsport more seriously, there is still that desire, that enjoyment out of it that I might not get with something else?
Probably the other way around. It's probably the other way around, and you touch on a wonderful point there, because I do loads of work around supporting others and mental health and various other things now, and I get to sit in lots of different rooms and tell my story, but I get equally to listen to lots of different people that have been far more successful than me. But the overriding message is people that reach the top level forget to enjoy what they're doing. It so often becomes the case where you're so fixated on success, you're so worried about what comes next and that competition aspect, that you forget to enjoy what it is that you're doing. And actually for the cricket, although I loathed getting out, it probably wasn't quite at that level. Whereas, certainly for the motorsport, and that's what I touched on a second ago about being the best that I could be. There were times where I really doubted myself and felt the pressure, and, really, I didn't necessarily enjoy it as much as looking back now, I wish I had, because, you are just in the most wonderful environment, and you are just doing what most people would absolutely dream to do. So looking forward and to where I am now, when I do the TV, I always say, regardless of what people say on social media and the hate and the abuse and everything that gets directed your way, I'm going to enjoy it. I am just going to enjoy what I'm doing, first and foremost, because that's the most healthy space to operate within. But, if I don't enjoy it, other people won't enjoy it as well. So, I'm really
get criticised for not enjoying it then anyway. So if you're going to get kind of criticism regardless, so you might as well have a good time with it yourself.
Listen, you'll write articles and people will climb all over it, and
Exactly.
It's 2025, and it's a hard space to operate within. But make the one person you want to impress the most yourself, and try and enjoy it as best you can.
I do wonder on the mental aspects, is something you touch on there in terms of this whole focus on success that we get to enjoy. I've thought about this a couple of times in both F1 and IndyCar this year, with the two examples that come to mind are both F1, but Hadjar and Hulkenberg. They're both drivers at two very different points of their careers. But I wonder for them if they're able to enjoy what they're doing more, and if that then translates to better performance on track, because the tools that they have, whilst good, are limited somewhat to maybe what they're either used to or what they would like, but they've accepted that and so can just go out and enjoy the driving, focus on the driving aspects, and that allows their mind to be a bit clearer and more focused, somewhat ironically, on the job in hand, and they're able to go out and get these performances that no one's really expecting them to get, even though they're more than capable. Whereas other drivers further up the grids are not being able to perform in the way they want to, and you're seeing how that's then impacting them. And I find that quite an interesting sort of
definitely. And I think it's, if you could sort of ribbon up the solution and put it in a bottle, you'd be a multi-billion. The equation's really easy. But actually recognizing it and making a change is really hard. So, you've got Lawson and Tsunoda, for example, are two prime examples there of people that aren't really flourishing in that space. Obviously, Lawson's now out of it, Tsunoda's still in it. But look at Marcus Ericsson in the IndyCar paddock. That's somebody who we know when he's walking tall and he's got a smile on his face and he's relaxed, he can be a top performer. But now the pressure's on, he's not enjoying it, he's making mistakes, and he doesn't look like he's a happy camper.
Exactly, and it's like you say, it's when you know that the driver is capable of it. It's easier to forgive the rookies in a sport in any category, because you're like, well, we'll give them a bit of time to do it. But when it is an established name, you go, okay, Ericsson F1 didn't go too well for you, but IndyCar is kind of came alive again. And then when he has this different form, like you say, it's really fascinating to watch how that all unfolds. But
I would extend it to Lewis Hamilton as well. Is Lewis
to a degree,
enjoying life to the full? Is he absolutely relishing and enjoying every second of that? And we do live in a world where at some stage in those performance environments it is result dependent, and for the top athletes, the athletes that are used to success, they're not going to be truly happy until they get the results. But still, there is a good casing point in, say, how Fernando Alonso has managed his career. I actually think he's looked.
There's someone who does need to figure out how to be happy with some of the things that he's had to deal with.
Yeah, but and the human element's so important.
Yeah, it definitely is, and like you say, the differing ways and how drivers deal with that, and of course, different categories. Obviously, you've got the top echelons of it with IndyCar, with F1, but then even the junior categories, and seeing how that's approached as well. Especially these days, like you say, when you're having to deal with so many more things that you simply wouldn't have to do when you were Alonso growing up or Lewis growing up, for example. With the next question as well, that I can bridge the gap between your motorsport career and your career now, then, which is obviously IndyCar related. So when did that kind of first come to your attention, and how did your motorsport career then lead to, commentary, essentially? Because do you always want to do that? If so, why? If not, how the heck did it happen?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realise, but my first foray into the TV world was on an IndyCar program with when Lee McKenzie and Keith Ewan used to sort of host the studio, and there was Christopher Tate there as well, and they used to have various different guests, and Charles Bradley was one of them. I was a guest, and so that was my first foray into that many moons ago, sort of 20 years ago. And then I had to wait a little bit for another break, and that came at Eurosport, when Eurosport was under the sort of Eurosport banner. I think it was a Formula Masters race at Spa, and I was brought in to colour commentate. And then I spent quite a few years commentating on various different things, whether or not it was F3000 at the time, Formula Masters, Formula Renault, whatever it was, alongside Martin Haven and Carlton Kirby, and sort of learning my trade with those two. And then I was given an opportunity to sort of make the transition into being a lead commentator. So there's always people that are more current, that know more in the pundit, in the colour role. So, if I wanted a career in broadcasting, it was important that I sort of made that lead transition. And that came through Eurosport again. And it was a case of stepping across and doing World Superbike. So that was my first time doing the bikes. It was my first time being lead commentator. It was a real challenge, a lot of firsts in there, a lot of new faces, new people, and people don't necessarily like change as well. So you have to battle through that initially, where the fans are like, "Who's this guy?" But I loved every second of it, and I've never looked back with the bikes. I'm doing World Supers again this weekend coming up, Misano. I do all the Endurance World Championship stuff. Just done the the Spa 8 hour. The bike paddock is really different to the car racing paddock, and just different characters. There's a real, it's a bit like a rugby changing room. There's no egos. It's not. Everyone's very, very down to earth. No one can get too big for their boots, too far past their station, and they're just very very brave as well. I remember doing my first commentary, and someone hurt themselves, fell off, and I remember just sort of talking through it live on air. I hope they're okay. All of the sort of sensitive comments that you would make in a moment like that. And Steve Parrish, who was sat next to me, was like, "Yeah, they're fine." Do you know what I mean? Yeah, their legs are facing the wrong direction, but they'll be out on the bike in 2 hours. Just bite on a bit of wood and suck it up, kind of thing. And it was a real baptism of fire as to just how far they push it in terms of their body.
I think that's always something that is quite interesting, like you say, when you get stuck in a new environment, and you may have been following bikes a little bit before then, but it's usually, whenever I hear this sort of story, it's normally an environment where they're aware of it, but they haven't followed it closely, and then you're just having to suddenly become an expert overnight at it. And I think my thing would be on that one would be, you see a serious crash, and you're trying not to have a, a genuine, real kind of reaction as you would at home going, and you kind of have to stop yourself from saying a couple of things, and then have that professionalism kick in, go, right, this is how I'm supposed to handle this now, instead of saying what I want to say and go, ooh, and you kind of there with, I think some of the IndyCar crashes that we had at the 500 and in Detroit, actually, just a couple of weeks ago, the commentators all kind of synchronization there going, ooh, that was a tough one. Kind of, yeah, that's kind of how you feel like everyone would normally react, and you're not used to hearing that from the commentary because they're usually so polished and ready for it. And okay, then they balance out and they realize and they go back to what they normally do. But it's always really interesting to try and catch them out on that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a difficult moment sometimes. Really difficult moment. Remembering that you're on air.
Did you know that commentary was something that you'd be interested in? Because, like you say, you were a guest on the IndyCar show, but then commentary is not necessarily something that you just wander into.
I was so disappointed when I couldn't drive. I found it really difficult to be around the sport initially. It's a bit, splitting up with someone you love or whatever it is. I loved the sport. I couldn't do what it was that I did. My passion was such that I felt like I'd lost my identity, and it was just so painful watching your friends do what you want to do. And so for the first sort of 12 months, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went and worked at Getty Images for a bit on the Laureus World Sports Awards account. That was far too much like hard work. That was commuting Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So, very quickly I went back to my roots, what my passion was, once the emotion had died down. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was doing a lot of instruction work, a lot of coaching, being in the paddock. TV gave me a lifeline. And once I sampled that environment, I loved every second of it and didn't look back there. And, I'm so grateful to get that opportunity. I'm so grateful that I found something that I love doing. As I said at the top, I love the performer elements, that adrenaline spike, the nerves that you get. And, it's a bit like doing a play or a performance or whatever it is, and being a musician, and you get to enjoy the events just like everyone else does, just in a different guise.
So there were points, obviously, like you say, it was a tough transition for you, and obviously not one that you wanted to make in a lot of ways. Did you ever consider just kind of leaving motorsport behind and moving on to something else in that kind of initial phase, or was it always
definitely.
sort of just the angry stuff, but then more like, I will go back to this probably?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and that was actually quite refreshing, but really frightening at the same time, because I'd lived in such a structured environment for so long and been so driven towards one goal, and then not having that, you kind of felt like you're wasting life, like everyone else is off on their pathway and you're not, kind of thing. So it was really strange. I felt like I'd lost my identity, definitely. I had the pressure of having to earn money, that comes comes to us all. So marrying what you want to do with actually what reality is, because you've got to work for a living and live.
Reality getting in the way of everything again.
Yeah, pay your way, and various other things. So, I spoke to various different people. There was opportunities in and around the business side, marketing. There was opportunities around the coaching side. I even looked at flying, the opportunity of, I've always wanted to maybe become a pilot. It's a bit late now, but I looked at that. I looked at various different things, but once I found TV, I've never looked back, and I hope that can continue for many a year to come.
So it's I think testament and proof that it's the world, or the element of the world that you're supposed to be in when, like you say, you go through such a big change that could have ended your involvement in the motorsport altogether, and yet you find a way to still be involved in it. It's a little bit like the sport taking care of you in a different way. It's kind of like, okay, we choose your spay out in one respect, but we're going to make sure that you're still here later for it in a different way. And it kind of made you reaffirms that when you made that decision all those years prior, that this was the direction you wanted to go, and that it was the right direction for you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's important to have a goal, have a direction, but like when we follow a sat nav, you have traffic jams, road closures, diversions. We know where we're going, but we don't know the route that we're going to go on. And then don't be totally fixated when you get towards your route on exactly where you need to be. I wanted to be in F1. I wanted to race cars in F1. I didn't manage to achieve that, but I've commentated in F1. I reached F1. I just swapped a steering wheel for a microphone. And, that's something to be incredibly proud of. And I am. And it just shows that, I did, to a certain extent, reach my goal. Don't be too fixated on that, and don't be too hard on yourself.
You obviously now commentate for IndyCar on Sky Sports, and you're saying that you went through kind of the training ranks of getting up there with the superbikes, with the endurance racing, with Eurosport. But when did this particular opportunity come about, and how quickly did you grab it with both hands?
So I was given the opportunity to cover the IndyCar Championship for BT before it became TNT. So BT Sport had the IndyCar rights, and so I covered it with BT for a couple of years, driving to Stratford, where they were based in the Olympic Park, around the North Circular. And then Sky Sports F1 acquired the rights, and I didn't know if I was going to get the opportunity to carry on, because that's the beauty of being a freelance broadcaster. If you're the channel that you're working for, if they lose the rights or someone else acquires them, or they don't show anything, there's a strong chance that you won't be doing that anymore. And actually, Neil Wooding rang me up from Sky Sports F1, who's one of the APs at F1, and he said, listen, we've got IndyCar. I know you've done it for BT. Would you like to come and do it with us? And I jumped at that.
Was that a bit of a moment of a sigh of relief, going, oh, good, yeah. I can keep going.
It's one of those ones where you play it cool on the phone, and then you put the phone down. Yes, so I was so pleased, and actually it's been an awesome journey, because Neil is such a good guy. He is really, really passionate about so many different sports, but primarily motorsport. He knows everything about everything, whether or not it's motorsport, Formula One, IndyCar, or Coventry City, or his beloved Northampton Saints. And he's just a joy to work with, and he does so much heavy lifting at Sky Sports F1 to make the IndyCar work. And together with Billy, who's the boss, who supports what we do, it's been a really, really exciting journey. And that's a journey that continues to grow, because we've moved across from NBC and Peacock as not really the international feed, but the host broadcaster is now Fox. And so, the relationship between the international partners like Sky Sports F1R and IndyCar and Fox is in its infancy, still growing. Loads of exciting plans, loads of things that could work. So it's been a great journey. Really, I absolutely love the IndyCar, and when Sky gave me the opportunity, I very much said to myself, I want to make a home for myself here. I want not a name for myself, but definitely want to make a home for myself here. And that IndyCar is something that definitely makes me tick throughout the season.
I think as well, from my perspective anyway, I don't know if you thought about this, but when you're doing the same series for multiple years, which now you have been, do you ever realize or consider the fact that for new fans, or for a certain number of fans anyway, that even though that we have the Fox commentary when we normally watch it for the majority of the time, but when we don't, it's you. Do you kind of realize that you're then getting associated with being the voice of IndyCar for God knows how many people? And if so, what does that kind of feel like? Or is that kind of not something you've thought too much about?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's something I've thought about, but it's something that I definitely recognize, and it's a real pinch yourself moment, because you just see yourself as one of the fans who's lucky enough to be in the seat that I'm in. I definitely do wear that responsibility on my shoulders, and so does Neil. We're really proud of what we do, and when it doesn't quite go right, or there's a technical fault, or that there's various different challenges that we need to get over, and if it doesn't always go right, you do wear that responsibility on your shoulders, that it's you at the helm, and that everyone's kind of counting on you to either make it right or get it right. But the Sky communities are really welcoming community. The engagement's great online. Everybody is really inclusive. We all have fun together, and it's like a social event once the season gets going, and we sort of all share in that fun. So yeah.
Definitely a challenge during the technical moments. I think back in Thermal Club of this year, for example, everyone probably just double checking they haven't stepped on the cable or accidentally pulled something out by accident, going, "Oh God, I hope that wasn't me," whatever it was.
Yeah, no, it became very clear that there was something quite catastrophically wrong from their end. And although you don't want it to go wrong at all, we were slightly relieved that it wasn't our end. But we've had our
from a fan perspective,
well.
it's always reassuring, because I was watching it, and a friend of mine that I do this IndyCar podcast with, he's in the States, so he messaged saying, "Oh, my feed's gone." Oh, thank God, it's not just my end; it's everyone. Okay, cool. It's not something I've got to worry about for myself. It's everyone's panicking about this.
Yeah, no, it was it was a difficult time, certainly for IndyCar. But we've had our challenges as well, and we've been trialing new technology over here, and we work hard to get it right, but it doesn't always happen, as you know.
No, but it's like you say, it's part of the fun of it as well. It's you get to try out all these different things, and you're trusted with it, I suppose, because like I say, you're seen as kind of not necessarily the face, sorry, but the voice of the IndyCar in a lot of ways. So if something doesn't go wrong, people don't mind it as much. Whereas if it was a guest commentator each time to come in and do something, I don't think that relationship would be quite as harmonious with the community as you've got it at the moment, for example. On the kind of flip side of that, in terms of when things do go well and another kind of pinch me moment, you've obviously commentated on some Indy 500s, including this year. What's that like? Because there's commentating on races, but then there's commentating on races.
Yeah, the fact that the Indy 500 is the most watched sporting event anywhere in the world in terms of bums on seat. And I think this year, every
No
one in
pressure.
1,100 people in America was at the Speedway. And then, it's like the Super Bowl. It's everyone's watching it, even if they're not quite hardened fans. It's one of those events that's so special, that has such a legacy, that whatever it, even my wife watches it. She's not an IndyCar fan. My dad, who's not really a motorsports fan, I said to watch the top, and he ended up watching the whole thing. And so, the Indy 500 is very, very special, but it's not lost on me that everyone, from Monaco, all of the names that you may or may not look up to in motorsport, people that know a huge amount about our sport, are now tuning in to watch you bring them this spectacle. And so that comes with a great deal of pressure, but it's an amazing privilege. And you're on such a high throughout that day, and we're on air for so long that by the end of it's really tiring with the studio lights and everything. But Simona's such a great guest. We've had Mark
I was
Blundell.
going to say, were you relieved by the fact that you had a couple of people there in Oliver and Simone there
Yeah,
with you on that
definitely.
occasion, going, "Oh, good, I've got a bit of support here."
And I thought Ollie Askew was brilliant as well. Having that American voice is important, and somebody like Simona that really knows it. And I really enjoyed this year. Definitely really enjoyed this year. It was great to talk to TK, Tony Kanaan, beforehand. And, we had the GT with Jacques, who I think spoke really well about his Indy 500 experience. So, yeah, it was a good race as well. Really difficult to predict what was going to happen. Wasn't just the usual big hitters at the front. We saw a few of the smaller teams getting really in and amongst it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of segues nicely, because I was going to ask you what you thought of the season so far, because Indy 500 in a lot of ways felt as if all the good behaviour we'd had up to that point in the season, we'd had two caution flags, and one of them didn't really count because it was the first lap of St. Pete. And then we were all just saving all of that for the Indy 500, then just go, here, have all of it in one go and figure it out for yourself. So that again gives you a bit of a challenge on an already long broadcast there. But on the wider note, what have you made of the season so far? Because I don't think anyone, Palou included, would have expected him to be on the run that he's been on.
No, exactly. And, it's the greatest start to an IndyCar season since AJ Foyt was doing his magic many, many moons ago. So it's always been a very, very tightly contested series. It's very, very hard to get on a run and to win. I mean, you can be consistent, and Palou has changed that over the years. He's consistently up there, but to consistently win is not something that we see a great deal of in IndyCar terms. And every now and then in sports, someone comes along, doesn't matter what the sport is, and kind of changes it for everybody else. And I think Alex Palou's done that. I don't buy into I'm not going to watch it now because it's boring or this or that. I think fans do their sport a disservice when they say that, because we should celebrate greatness when we see it. And it's certainly a joy to watch him. It should be a joy to watch people that really are, or teams that really are at the top of their game. And he is very, very special. I've said it before, I don't think there's a more complete package in a driver anywhere in the world, apart from, say, the likes of Max Verstappen. You look at Formula One, I think Alex Palou is very, very good in terms of that. He has that magic. Not only does he have the speed, but he has that sort of capacity that great racing drivers have to almost free up the driving aspect and focus solely on all of the other things that you need to be thinking of to be as successful.
A little bit like Fernando Alonso watching the race as he's in the race, sort of mentality of he's got somehow the bandwidth and the time to be doing all of this on top of doing what he does. And
Michael Schumacher was like that. So he definitely has that. So I think, what we witnessed is pretty special. Obviously, it didn't go his way in Detroit. He was there and thereabouts, and the old IndyCar came back to play.
Yeah, very much so. I think that's part of the reason why I mean I wasn't anywhere near that spot anyway, but why I wasn't going to be writing off IndyCar anytime soon. It's getting boring, or they were having F1 2023 over an IndyCar, and it's come full circle to bite me in the ass on that one from switching over at that point a bit more to watching it, because it is more of a rarity in IndyCar for this to happen. Like you say, it's the first time since AJ Foyt has been on such a good run, and that was a while ago now. So I think it's one of the things where we've been joking on the podcast that this whole season it's trying to see how long it takes for the drivers to figure out it's not just one of you trying to take him on, it's all of you having to work together in some aspect to go and take him on together because that's the only way it's going to happen. And seeing all these different strategies that aren't currently working to beat him because, as Kirkwood said in Long Beach, okay, yeah, I'm really happy I won, but he's still second. That we can't be having that if we're going to be trying to beat him over the course of the season. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just him. At the end of the day, Barry Wanzer is an incredible talent. Mike Hull is just an absolute legend. Chip Ganassi knows how to assemble a team and how to be successful. But the whole team there are very, very good. And you look at the mistakes that Andretti have made up and down the pit lane over various different races. You know, that whole setup for the Palou car, the 10 car, you know, they don't make mistakes at all across the board. And they had that slogan where it's like, we're not going to beat ourselves this weekend. So they don't make mistakes to beat themselves. Look at the 500, Taku going deep, then Hunter Ray running out of fuel, not being able to refill. You know, these little things, people are pushing themselves so hard to beat Palou or to get the car serviced and out quicker than Chip Ganassi that they're making mistakes. And, you know, that's pressure. But in order to beat them, you need to be absolutely perfect, or Malukas needs to fire into the turn one barrier
Every single time. It might get suspicious if he does it a couple more times.
Yeah, exactly.
Even there in Detroit, though, he gets knocked out essentially, and everyone's still going, well, that's great for us because it helps for a minute, but it's not something we can rely on. And the contrast, like I say, is that it wasn't a mistake he made. It was something that happened to him. It's still the team as a whole doing kind of perfection every single race with every element of it. And on the flip side of that, you mentioned Andretti. We're all just quite separately kind of giving a standing ovation to Andretti for having given Colton Herta a good set of pit stops for once this year, because we haven't seen that very often. And we're just happy for him to get through a weekend where he can be not having to beat himself or the team up over anything. And he's finally had a clean weekend. And it shows that, again, Andretti, it's not a small team. It's not a name that people don't know. You expect greatness from it. So the fact that they're on the back foot like this shows that, okay, yeah, they're doing a great job, but the competition really needs to step it up and get the fundamentals in place, if nothing else, because I think you can say, okay, the driver might not be doing X, Y, and Z, but that's only one element of it. You still need to build the rest of it. Like you say, Palou he can do everything perfectly, but if the team's not there, he's not going to be then still winning every race or every second race.
Yeah, no, and there's some great storylines up and down the paddock. Christian Lundgaard, Arrow McLaren, where's Pato's head? You know, Colton Herta's in a similar situation as Andretti Global now, because Carl Kirkwood's 1-2 on the bounce in terms of the street courses, and you know, is growing with confidence. Like Team Penske now,
where before you even touch them with anything,
off the back of having just a massive personnel change. So yeah, there's some wonderful storylines up and down pit lane, and you know, they're all chasing Alex Palou and Chip Ganassi.
I think that was one of the fun elements of trying to predict how the season's going, is that you're looking at these drivers, you're going, okay, Penske, they kind of say, we're going to beat ourselves mentality of Chip Ganassi. They looked at last season and went, well, we can't have a worse start to the season than that, and then they went and beat themselves on that one this year. And Christian Lundgaard comes into McLaren, does a much better job than people may be thinking. Kirkwood, same with Andretti, steps up and does these things there. And then Prema, this team that no one Well, we know as Europeans what to expect from them. They didn't quite have the start to the season that anyone wanted, and then of all the people to take the fight initially to Palou at the 500, you've got these one-off drivers like Takuma Sato, and then Robert Schwartzman of all people sticks it on pole, and you're going, not where I thought this was going, but it's brilliant storytelling because who the hell would have predicted that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, looking at the ovals, it's whether or not Bremer can carry on some of that Michael Cannon magic
Hmm.
on these ovals, because now we get into the oval season a bit more. Will we see the likes of Team Penske come to the front? What car have Arrow McLaren got? Andretti have always struggled in the aero screen era on the ovals, and then introduced the hybrid at the end of last year, and their car was all of a sudden a
Hmm.
lot better. They had a decent car at the 500. So, yeah, really interested to see now we get into the ovals what happens. Always does upset the form guide a little bit.
Especially
And
as you bring in the smaller teams and drivers as well. I mean, Connor Daly's obviously known for his ovals, especially Timo Lucas was having a strong showing at the 500, and they're not championship drivers necessarily, but they don't really mind spoiling the party for everyone else and seeing what they can do.
the likes of, Foyt with Team Penske's setup sheets, and then Santino Ferrucci and
Mm.
David Lucas, who are both very, very quick on ovals. What can they do? So, and that's what I love about IndyCar. We're just rattling names off here because actually they've earned the right to be rattled off. And
Yeah,
we go into this weekend thinking, what's going to come out the other side.
and you can't even say Palou's a certainty because until the 500, he'd never won on an oval. So it's
Yeah,
kind of
I
even
know
if he
that.
even if he hadn't won there, you're still kind of thinking, well, we're getting to that season. Something might happen here, which is also insane in its own right.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see if the hangover continues, because whether or not it's bad luck, he's had a lot of luck. You earn your own luck, but he had some bad luck at Detroit. There's always a
Mm.
bit of a hangover for the Indy 500 champion. What Chip Ganassi and what Alex Palou will we see this weekend, and who's going to step into his shoes?
Well, that's a whole other question, which is going to probably even be more difficult to answer because of how we've seen some of the things go. I think if we'd asked at the start of the season and been told that Carl Kirk was going to be the only person to have beaten Palou, we'd have been going, "You sure about that? I mean, he's very good and everything, but that's of all the people here, is that the one that's going to do it? It's a bit strange, but that's the beauty of it, as you say."
With Kirkwood, for me, when you speak to people that work with him, when you speak to various different other drivers, they really rate Kirkwood. And
Hmm.
we haven't necessarily seen that yet from him. He's always been in the shadows of Colton Herta in terms of one lap speed and that kind of stuff. Now he's turned that hype train into a bit more of a proven product. It's going to be interesting if he kicks on off the back of that, because all the good drivers, all the ones that live up to their reputation, will kick on off the back of success. It
Hmm.
becomes, becomes a sort of pathway for them, and that confidence just continues to grow and grow and grow. And he is very good, and so I'm interested to see what happens there, because Colton looked for the first time ever at Detroit a little bit beat up mentally.
Which I could understand given the season he's been having so
Yeah,
far,
yeah,
to be
just a
honest.
human being. Yeah, we'd all be the same. Yeah.
Mean question for you then. Any predictions for the remainder of the season?
Yeah. So I'm really interested to see what Christian Lundgaard um, is doing. I love Pato Award. I mean, he is just brilliant, and Pato's a great talent as well, on and off the track. But Christian's brought a sort of a steely edge to him, and you can see
Hmm.
Zach was around him at Detroit. You could see Zach kind of vibing off that, and they rate Christian really highly, and he just seems to be very, very resilient. and very, very confident in his own ability. And you kind of see in him somebody that's just building a real run of momentum that he's not going to relinquish. You know,
So
he
it
looks
feels
very
a little
solid.
bit with him and Kirkwood in different ways, character wise, but from performance wise, I mean, it's reminding me of Leclerc last year and Russell this year a bit in terms of they're just getting on with the job at hand, and all of a sudden you get to like the last third of the season and they're right there in it, and you go, how the hell have you managed to do that? Where have you come from this time? I mean, they've just been quietly going about their business.
Yeah, he's always there and thereabouts. So I'm really interested to see that because Arrow McLaren have a decent car on the ovals, and obviously we've got a chunk of ovals. So he's already proved that they're in a good stead on the road and street courses in that, in his side of the fence at Arrow McLaren. So I think for me, if I had to, we've talked about Carl Kirkwood, can he kick on? But where's Christian Lundgaard going to take this? Really interested to see that.
Any other little predictions for driver moves or anything unexpected? If you could maybe have like one random race winner that you think who else is going to win. I mean, obviously we only had two this year so far, but if there's going to be third, dare we say it? Who do you reckon it might be?
I mean, Maluka seems to be now he's up to full fitness, was struggling off the back of having surgery in the winter with his wrist again at the start of the
Hmm.
season, wasn't quite as fit as he wanted to be, seems to have settled in at Foyt. He's an easy one to say off the back of his strong showing at the Indy 500. Oh, yeah, he's going to be one to look out for. But yeah,
Definitely
I
would
think,
help fuel the Team Penske kind of speculation, wouldn't it?
yeah. Yeah, and the big question marks. What's going to happen to Will Power and Marcus Ericsson? I think that those are the big question marks for me.
For fun, non-motorsport related questions, and to finish
I
things
think
off
we
and
might see
switch things up.
Hauger. I'm just going to say it now. I think
Oh,
we might
Helga.
see Hauger
Yeah.
in the Andretti Global car next year.
I was saying yesterday or the day before, I think, to someone else that if you're all of the other Indy Next drivers this year and last year, you are getting so annoyed at Louis Foster and Dennis Hogan because if it wasn't for them, you'd be like cream of the crop. You'd be having a great time of it. And then these two guys come out of virtually nowhere and just take everything by storm. And you're going, damn. Because they're
Yeah,
all really good drivers, but you see that point gulf between Hauger and Collette now, and was it Foster and Abel last year, and able to get into IndyCar, which was great for him. But you just think, oh, Foster did make it difficult for me to stand out because there's just such a. You look at the golf he had back to third place as well last year, and it was a massive points gap as well. And just you feel a little bit for all those other drivers, but you can't deny that Hauger's been incredibly impressive, and it's exactly what his career needed after F2.
yeah. I think he'll be good, and it takes the commercial pressure off Andretti Global as well. They're paying three big
Mhm.
salaries, so he won't be commanding a big salary in year one.
No, yeah, I'd quite like to see him. I think that'd be a great story as well. Just even if it's not this year, if it's next year, for him to come into IndyCar, considering where he was in Formula Three, the hype he had around him, Formula Two not going his way, and then to go, you know what, I could have stayed there, but I went over to America, and he does the American dream kind of story there instead. Works really
You've
nicely
seen some
for him.
good, Lundqvist. He deserved an opportunity. He was a good Indy Next
Mm.
driver. Obviously, Louis Foster's come from Europe, done the same thing. Hauger now, starting to be a bit of a trend.
There's see so many storylines, and there's always something to do with IndyCar. I love that, and it's good. I think it's fascinating to see the drivers coming over from Europe, from Formula Two, and I want to see more of it in reverse. I think as well. I think obviously no one's done what Nigel Mansell has done since he did it, but I'd quite like Palou to be the one to give that a go if he did the opposite. Maybe if he wins this season, let's see what we can see on that one. I know I'm probably thinking a bit too
No, I think
creatively, but
I asked him point blank when I spoke to him on Sky Sports F1. What he wanted to do, and he's very much. And it wasn't a political answer. He's very
Hmm.
focused on what he's doing here, and he's enjoying making America his home. I think with everything that went on, and all of the stuff off of the circuit and in the courtroom and various other things, it's made his move to Formula One very political,
Hmm.
and he's enjoying. He's just enjoying being celebrated, and the success he's having in America. I think he's made a home for himself, and I don't think he's too keen to turn his nose up at that at the moment.
We'll just have to convince Verstappen to come to IndyCar instead then and do it that way. That's what I'm hearing.
You know what? Listen, I like a lot of Formula One drivers don't want to do the 500. I can never say what Max does or doesn't want to do, but Valtteri Bottas has talked about wanting to do it. It would be great to see more F1 drivers do more things like Alonso's done with Le Mans, with the 500. I think we're in an era where it's hard to do that, but it would be very special and magical to see.
Well, I enjoyed when Carl Larson's trying to do the double. It's something different, and you don't need them to succeed at it for it to still be a story. You're just enjoying the fact that they tried to do it because it's such a rare thing anyway. So I think that works. It works by itself. A couple of fun questions then, as I said, to finish off, that nothing to do with motorsport. I mean, they probably could get tied to motorsport. I'm going to try and steer you away from it if possible. Do you have a favourite film?
Do you know what? I don't watch a lot of movies. I think my attention span's too too short. But I do like some old school classics. So I like things like The Great Escape. I like obviously Days of Thunder, Top Gun. I like things like The Shawshank Redemption. So I don't really have
solid choices so far. As a collection, it works.
The vast spectrum of films there in terms of genre. But yeah, maybe some wartime classics. That's other things, yeah.
And then do you know, or do you think you know what you would have done if you hadn't become a commentator, or if you had nothing to do with sport? What do you think you'd have ended up doing?
My ambition was to become a pilot. So as a young age, I was always fascinated with airplanes. And when they had the Queen's building, when you can go up at Terminal 3 and watch, put your 20p in the telescope and watch the planes on the airfield and taking off and landing, I was always begging my mum to take me down there in the school holidays. So I had a real interest to do something like that. And I think, knowing myself now like I do, I would have to do something sort of kinesthetic, practical, creative. I'm not great sitting down in an office.
I was going to say, is the pilot and the Top Gun being in one of the favorite films a correlation point there? Is that where you'd be going with that, do you think? Or would that then sort of aim for that and see what happens?
I'll take Maverick. Yeah, that's my inspiration.
Well, you can get your pilot license before they do the third film. You can try to sneak in there, maybe.
I quite like to, I don't know, just do anything, even if it's military, commercial, flying. Prince William's done some great stuff, flying the air ambulance or police or whatever it is. Yeah.
The pilot. There's always going to be a speed and thrill aspect in it. That's the through line I'm noticing here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for being here today. I want to thank you for your time and wish you best of luck with everything for the rest of the season, commentary wise, and look forward to seeing where else you pop up.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me on, and keep up the good work, and let's maybe do it again sometime soon.
Thank you again to Tom for taking the time to chat. Wishing the best of luck for the rest of 2025 and beyond. If you want to follow Tom's career, follow him on Instagram at Tom Gaymor. Further details, as well as where to find more of me, can be found in the description of this episode. In the meantime, I'll be back soon with another interview with someone from the world of motorsport. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.